When you're driven to get the job done right, the days are long and the miles are many. You can't accept good enough, and you don't believe in limits. To make something truly better than before, to make it last, you never settle and demand a higher level of precision. Day in and day out, we're on that path, advancing filtration science, developing superior filtration technologies to keep you going, to ensure your performance now and in the future, to protect, to go further, to keep you going. Run cleaner, longer, with the certainty of filtration science.
All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here and to join our training session today. Really excited to get into our topic here in a couple minutes, but want to quickly introduce myself for those that I have not had the opportunity to meet before. My name is Jay Stevenson. I am the North America training leader for Atmos Filtration Technologies. I've been working with the Fleetguard brand for a little over the last 11 years, based here in Nashville, Tennessee, and hopefully get a chance to connect with you guys individually here sometime soon. As you can see from our training topic today that you signed up for, hopefully you're in the right place. We're going to be talking a little bit about diesel exhaust fluid, or DEF as it's commonly referred to, and the filtration that goes on those DEF systems. So going to talk a little bit about the reason that diesel exhaust fluid is used, why, how it works, what's in it, types of contamination found in diesel exhaust fluid. And then we're going to talk about the filtration side of it as well, right? And hopefully uncover or unveil a little bit of the tools and resources that are at your disposal as you think about using these products out in your particular applications. In order to get the full picture of why diesel exhaust fluid was introduced into the marketplace, we're going to have to go back in time in just a second. And we're going to look at kind of the history of the first emission standards. So if you go back in time, the first set of emission standards were adopted at the federal level here in the United States from 1974, kind of back around that time, early 70s. But the most significant changes have occurred really in the last 20 to 30 years. For you guys that have been around the trucking industry or diesel engine industries for a while, you're very familiar with these changes that have taken place. These regulatory emissions challenges were typically met by truck OEMs, so the actual truck and equipment manufacturers, through the improvement of engine designs, right? So the in-cylinder actual engine designs until about the early 1990s. And we needed a little bit more help to get us to where we wanted to go. So 1994 rolls along, and once the 1994 emissions regulations took effect, the industry started seeing the use of diesel oxidation catalysts along with the introduction of low sulfur diesel fuel. The next big change occurred in regulations around 2004, and this brought about exhaust gas recirculation, or EGR as it's commonly known as. And this technology was brought into the trucking industry back around that time, early 2000s. Then, beginning in 2007 and phasing then through about 2010, manufacturers of trucks and equipment were facing the toughest emission challenges to date. And this 2007 to 2010 emission standards brought at least 3 new major provisions. The first of which, number one, you had fuel refiners, and they were starting to be required to produce ultra low sulfur diesel fuel, or ULSD. And that was around 2006. And that was going to help pave the way for sulfur intolerant exhaust emissions control technologies. It's a mouthful. Things like catalytic diesel particulate filters, or DPFs, NOx catalysts, right? These are things that have been widely introduced to meet those 2007 through 2010 emissions requirements. Number two, the standard then required that the emissions that are discharged out into the atmosphere, so when an engine produces emissions, anything that goes out in the atmosphere has to be added to the exhaust emissions during all testing. So essentially things that didn't used to be counted as emissions were now being counted as emissions, and kind of that total cumulative number. And so that was something that truck OEMs were going to have to start to reckon with as well. And then third, and most relevant for us today, is the invention of selective catalytic reduction, or SCR, as it's commonly referred to, which incorporates the use of diesel exhaust fluid. So we look at this NOx problem, the particulates, the things that we used to just kind of vent and pump out into the atmosphere out of our engines. We're trying to be better about cleaning those things up. And so the invention of all of these different acronyms and technologies came along to really go about combating that, which has brought along, some challenges. It's not all been puppies and rainbows and sunshine, but it has helped with the emissions challenge we've been facing here, not only in this country, but around the world. And you might be wondering, okay, well, how much of a difference has it made? Very interestingly, if we were to take the measured allowable diesel exhaust emissions from a single truck in the early 1990s and compared it to the allowable diesel exhaust emissions from today, the reduction in emissions has meant that it would take roughly 35 Class 8 trucks to make the same level of emissions that were in place and acceptable for that single truck in the early 1990s. I think that's mind-blowing. That's pretty staggering when you consider the impact of how many trucks are on the road, and that number continues to increase every year, right? These are things that we, our families, our children, we're all breathing cleaner air as a consequence because of the things we're doing, and that's this technology that's come along. So that's something that I think objectively we can be pretty excited about. It is amazing for you guys that are around trucks a lot. You'll know just how much cleaner these trucks are than what they used to be back in the day. So diesel exhaust fluid, it's part of this combination of things that are helping us get to the thing we're looking at here on the screen. So let's talk a little bit about diesel exhaust fluid. So what is it? From a chemical standpoint, diesel exhaust fluid is a mixture of really two things. You've got 67.5% demineralized water, and you've got 32.5% urea. And for those that aren't chemistry majors like me, I was not a chemistry major, not my thing, but urea is a organic compound that is odorless, it's colorless, and it's highly soluble in water. And it's also the main nitrogen-containing substance in the urine of mammals. So hence why urea and urine sound so similar. Chemically, there's a lot of things going on there, very similar. And the reason it's used to make diesel exhaust fluid, the reason why it's added to water, is that when it's injected into the hot exhaust gas stream, right? So that stream of exhaust that's coming out of the engine, the water will actually evaporate, and that urea will chemically react to neutralize those gases that we want to remove from the exhaust system. So it's actually a chemical reaction that's neutralizing kind of the bad stuff coming out of that exhaust. Now, something to point out here, DEF is made with very high purity requirements that are specified by several international standard organizations, including ISO. So, the actual ISO governing body. So regardless of the different brand or type you go buy in the marketplace today, these are very highly scrutinized, highly controlled fluids, and they're going to be chemically identical. They're going to provide the same benefit to your advanced emission systems. From that standpoint, it is kind of a commodity product. Fleetguard used to sell diesel exhaust fluid. We kind of got out of selling that years ago. There wasn't a whole lot of margin in selling a product like that for us. So we did kind of pull out of that market. One kind of newer product that you guys may have seen or may have heard of out in the marketplace today, though, is a product that's a little different. It's actually being manufactured by Peak, I believe it is, Blue DEF Platinum. And essentially, this is your traditional diesel exhaust fluid that does have a slight different, it's got a little bit of a chemical variation there with some additives, actually. So when you think about kind of the cooling system with additives in your coolant, they've added some additives to their diesel exhaust fluid product to help with deposits actually through that system. So this is kind of a newer product that's in the marketplace. You may have seen that platinum product out there. Chemically, it's a little slightly different, but it does still have your water and urea, mixture. It just has a little bit of additive package blended into that as well. So maybe a couple of facts here about diesel exhaust fluid as well, if you're not too familiar with what's really in this stuff. Diesel exhaust fluid is clear in appearance. It should have an ammonia type odor, not overly powerful, but a little bit of an ammonia odor. It is not hazardous, but short-term exposure can be mildly irritating to your eyes and skin. So, when you're handling it, proper protective equipment would be well advised. If you get it on yourself, wash it off, clean it off. But it's not chemically, it's not toxic or anything like that, but you don't want to just leave it out on your skin if you get it on yourself. Due to the chemistry, it actually can corrode some metallic components if it's kind of left on there for an extended period of time. So, something good as a best practice, if you do spill this stuff on any tools or on your equipment or on the side of the truck or anything like that, just a good idea to kind of, wash it off. You can take a hose or just, get some water and kind of rinse it off and keep it from sitting there and corroding on those metal components. Diesel exhaust fluid does freeze at 11 degrees Fahrenheit. That's negative 11.5 degrees Celsius. If you're worried about the DEF freezing, it really should not impact the startup or operation of your vehicle or equipment. Most selective catalytic reduction systems, or SCR systems today, are designed to provide heating for the DEF tank and those supply lines upon engine startup. So, even if it freezes, it will thaw back out and it will work properly. So there's really no issue there. You shouldn't have a major concern from that standpoint. Diesel exhaust fluid will evaporate, because it has such high water content. So if it's exposed to oxygen, it will evaporate over time, and it can leave behind kind of a white chalky residue, kind of a crystal substance when it dries out. We're going to see some photos of that here in a few minutes. So that would be something to pay attention to. If you ever notice that happening, it should be an indication somewhere that oxygen is able to get to that fluid, and it is creating a situation where it's just evaporating. Shelf life. We're going to talk more about this as well in a few minutes. Just a reminder, but shelf life will depend on the temperature of your storage facility. It's recommended that you store diesel exhaust fluid between 12 degrees Fahrenheit and 86 degrees Fahrenheit. If you can keep it below 65, shelf life can be extended a little while, but it's recommended that you keep it in a climate controlled environment, at least indoors, out of direct sunlight. That's going to help at least maximize the life that it's supposed to have, which is around a year. So let's look at how the after treatment system works. The system's not overly complicated to understand, and it does actually share somewhat of a common principle with fuel injection. So you have a supply unit, or a pump, if you want to call it that, and it's going to draw diesel exhaust fluid from the DEF tank, and it's going to feed it in through that DEF dosing valve, which kind of operates sort of like a fuel injector. That dosing valve is going to inject the diesel exhaust fluid into the exhaust stream, which, like we said earlier, is going to chemically react to convert those NOx particles into harmless levels of nitrogen and water vapor. And it's going to eliminate kind of that diesel smell too as well. So, again, this chemical reaction that's happening here through that dosing valve is going to, really neutralize and convert chemically, the bad stuff into stuff that's okay, essentially. So this pump, it operates at approximately 9 bar, or about 130 PSI, which is pretty low compared to fuel injection pressures. If you've ever sat through one of our sessions, we talk high pressure common rail injectors. Those run at tens of thousands of PSI, so incredibly high pressure. So 130 PSI is not really that high of a pressure, but it is typically higher than what you're going to see through the lube oil system on an engine. That dosing valve is kept cool by recirculating DEF back through the tank as well. So similar principle kind of to what we see in a fuel system. And earlier on, something to point out here, when diesel exhaust fluid was implemented in the industry, people were really asking a lot about DEF consumption. How much fluid are we going to go through, over time? And this is a difficult thing to quantify because it is dependent on duty cycle rather than the distance traveled, generally speaking, right? So the doser, it's only delivering diesel exhaust fluid when the exhaust temperature exceeds a certain temperature, and that's that exhaust temp. If it reaches 482 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 250 degrees C. Once it reaches that point, that's when that doser is going to start operating. So trucks that are making long distance highway trips, they might be dosing a lot more frequently or constantly, where some applications that may be a lot more of a stop go situation, with varying weight loads and passengers and transient use of the engine, all those sorts of things, it could be dosing less. So it is kind of variable depending on the application, depending on the duty cycle of that particular vehicle, that piece of equipment. So it is a little hard to quantify. It's kind of a it depends sort of answer, regarding how much fluid you're going to use over time. And of course, we're looking there. You can't forget the filter. So we're going to talk about that here shortly. So the tanks, on most heavy duty trucks, these DEF tanks are found right next to the fuel tanks, which honestly was a very poor decision by people that were making that decision over time. We see some of the issues we see with contamination, cross contamination is essentially a result of those tanks being right beside each other and people not paying attention. We're going to look at that in just a second. But different OEMs are going to install the tanks in different locations depending on who's make and model. But they should most easily be identified by those bright blue filler caps. So if you see the bright blue filler cap, generally that's telling you, hey, this is for inserting the DEF into this tank. Oftentimes, like even on the pictures you see there on the screen, it's telling you, hey, do not put fuel in here. Only put diesel exhaust fluid here in this particular entryway. Similar thing that can happen. People can accidentally put DEF into the fuel system, and that's also a huge no-no. That's going to cause a very expensive mistake that you're going to have to spend a lot of money to get fixed. So just like we always preach about and talk about, as far as contamination from a filter perspective, there are a few different types of contaminants that can get into this system, and that's why we have a filter on the DEF system. The first type of contaminant there on the left is organic contaminants. Specifically, really what we're talking about here are those urea crystals that can form due to a change in temperature, possible exposure to air outside the tank. We're going to look at that here shortly. We also have inorganic contaminants, and these are things, again, that are not natural to the fluid itself. A lot of times this is going to be stuff like dirt, sediment, sand, wear metals, plastics, other materials that are not natural to the diesel exhaust fluid itself that have found their way into that tank. And lastly, there's the risk of foreign fluids making their way in there, like we talked about. DEF is a clear fluid, and so are many other fluids. So people can accidentally put the wrong thing in there by mistake if they are not paying attention to the container they're using. And again, can cause a lot of problems. I've seen quotes online of more than $10,000 to repair fuel lines and fuel systems as a result of DEF going into those. So cross-contamination can happen. It's really important to make sure you have things properly labeled and people are informed on exactly how they should be maintaining these systems and not putting the wrong things in the wrong places. It's going to create a headache for yourself. So this is, again, a common field issue. I think as I think about customers we've had come through our facility doing tours, and we ask questions around this stuff, almost every single person that's come through, working either on the dealer side of things or on the fleet side of things has seen this, where somebody has put diesel exhaust fluid into a fuel system. So this is what we're looking at here, a fuel filter kit, fuel filter element there that's all plugged up with urea crystals. And this is actually what it looks like under the microscope. So scanning electron microscope, which is a really high-powered microscope at our technical center in Tennessee. You can see the individual urea crystals there really plugging this thing up. That's at 1,000 times magnification. We can go all the way down to about 5,000 times magnification. You can see those urea crystals, which usually it's a dead giveaway when we see that in a field return. Yes, somebody put the wrong fluid in the wrong place, and now we've got plugging issues. So, we talked contamination. Really, as you think about it, almost all diesel powered, passenger cars, trucks, heavy trucks and equipment built since 2010 are equipped with an SCR system, and they require diesel exhaust fluid. That's readily available at most fueling stations, automotive parts retail stores. I know you can even buy this stuff at places like Lowe's and Home Depot. I mean, it's very prevalent. But it's just a reminder here, every time that you open that system up and pour fluid into that tank, there is a chance for contaminant to enter the system, which can clog that dosing valve and keep the system from working properly. If you get a clogged dosing valve in that SCR system, that is going to trigger some check engine lights, and it's going to possibly even derate the engine and cause you some serious problems. So, proper maintenance, definitely a good best practice as you put these fluids and into the system, and take care of the filtration on these systems as well. I mentioned this earlier, but just quickly to hit on it again, storage conditions for DEF are important. Another common issue that happens that we hear about and see is diesel exhaust fluid cost, where it is degraded, where you've had either a vehicle or piece of equipment that's been sitting for a really long time with no climate control. If it's been sitting out in hot weather, direct sunlight, or even just the fluid itself as it's stored. If you're storing this stuff outside and not using it quickly, it probably is going to not hold up too well over time. That quality is really important. That 67.5% water and 32.5% urea, that exact combination is really important. And so if we start getting kind of out of whack on either end of that spectrum, so if the water starts evaporating out, that mixture is not going to be the same. So that storage is really important. Diesel exhaust fluid, manufacturers recommend using DEF within 1 year from the manufacture date. So you can look at that date code printed directly on the packaging. It's going to tell you when that fluid was produced. So you want to use within 1 year. And like we're saying, good housekeeping practices. This is one of those things where just being diligent about it, it's going to help make sure the whole system works properly. Here are some photos where you can see, again, those urea crystals that are forming around the tank, either the tank inlet or various parts of the after treatment system. And usually, if you're seeing this stuff, it's a dead giveaway that you've got some sort of leak and air is being exposed to the system, and it's going to start evaporating the water out, and you're going to start noticing this kind of white chalky substance everywhere. You can see that was a DEF tank there in the middle that had a leak, and that fluid essentially evaporated out, and it created a big nasty chalky mess. They had to just take the whole tank off and replace that whole system. So that was an expensive fix. And finally, back to the filter. Kind of where we're going to wrap up today. So when you think about the filter on these systems, like we talked about, there are contaminants that can get in these systems, and we want to prevent those from reaching that dosing system and causing damage or premature malfunction. There are a number of Fleetguard DEF filters available today, but for the purposes of our call here for North America, I'm really just going to highlight the main part number that we sell today, and that is Fleetguard UF 106. UF, that UF prefix, of course, does stand for urea filter, like we talked about. This part number does apply to, really the more modern Cummins heavy duty and medium duty applications. So particularly think about your Cummins X15 engines. You'll also see these on some of the Detroit applications as well, and some of the PACCAR applications as well. So it is really one of our more popular DEF filters, urea filters, whatever you want to call it. And, as you think about the filtration media, oftentimes media becomes part of these conversations. Really, we're not going after super, super fine particles like we would on a fuel system. So, typically you're going to see cellulose media. You may see a little bit more legacy media technology in the development of these urea filters. Again, we're not going after very single micron size particles in these systems. You're kind of going after a little bit larger debris typically. So, Micron rating is probably not something you're going to be looking at, as part of the conversation for choosing the right filter. These are kind of proprietary designs for these after treatment systems. So it's basically find the right part number and, use the right part. This particular filter, though, it is a little different than maybe some of the other part numbers we sell because it does come as a kit. So you'll notice here on the screen, you have the actual filter element. There's a little kind of rubber frost membrane that goes over on the right side. And then you've got a kind of a tougher, a little bit harder plastic material outer cap housing that is going to kind of fit over those components. And then finally, it does come with a small spray bottle of lubricant, which is used on the cap housing during installation. So you spray it on the threads for that install. There's a link here that you can go and check out on YouTube. It's not one of our videos, but just a good one I found from a gentleman that was showing you how to service this particular filter on a truck application. So if you want to go check that out and see how to do the install on UF 106, pretty good video I thought was really helpful out on YouTube. So you can go bump his numbers up. As far as maintenance, when should we be changing these filters? They are a typical maintenance item. They should be replaced at least annually. Cummins, in particular, in their technical service bulletins, state that these diesel exhaust fluid filters should be serviced annually or at 300,000 miles. But operators should always consult with their vehicle's OEM guidelines. So, stick to what your OEM says. Cummins, for their applications, they do state 300,000 miles, or that's 6,750 hours. But studying up on this number, it seemed like there's a lot of variation on recommended service intervals by mileage. So again, always promoting the service guidelines provided by the vehicle manufacturer. That's going to be your safe bet. That's going to be the best bet for you. As far as service, though, the actual service vent, it's pretty straightforward. There's a cap located on the tank. It's going to twist off, and the filter is found underneath. Pretty simple filter change. It's not going to take too long, but it will prevent damage to that DEF dosing equipment and as part of that after treatment system. So it's kind of an easy thing to do, but something you should have on your PMs as you go about servicing and maintaining your trucks and equipment. This is technology. We talked about it a little bit, but it's been around for a while. It's not new technology. We've had it for over a decade now. But we have, even in recent years, still run into people that did not realize that there were filters on these dosing pumps. And every time they ran into problems, they were just changing the pump out. And that is certainly one way to change the filter, but that is a very expensive way to change the filter. So make sure people are aware. If you're, talking to folks that are in this world, make sure they know that that is a maintenance item to change the filter on these dosing systems. And that's going to keep that system happy and healthy. Our products, of course, are backed by the Fleetguard warranty. So in the event you ever use a Fleetguard product and our product has some sort of failure that causes an engine or a piece of equipment to go down, we will provide a non-proration to that product and essentially make you whole and get that system back up and running. And we don't prorate we're not going to provide partial value. We're going to provide the full value of getting you back to where you need to be with your engine and your piece of equipment. So you can really take that peace of mind using the Fleetguard products. If you need more information, I would encourage you to go check out our YouTube channel. We've got a video that kind of walks you through this UF 106 product. You can also find more information on DEF and urea filtration out on the fleetguard.com website. Those are both good resources for you. Or if you just have a direct question you want to reach out, please don't hesitate to do that either. We really strive to be best in class when it comes to training resources, tools on hand for fleets and delivery partners. And these are just a couple of avenues we have for you guys. But certainly, reach out to your local Fleetguard representative if you know who that is. And if you don't know who that is and need to get in contact with them, again, please reach out. We'll make sure you have the right resources and personnel at your fingertips. Well, folks, that is all the information I provided today that I put together for us. And I'm going to take a quick pause here. And if you guys have any questions that you'd like to ask via the chat window or our Q&A window here in Zoom, we would love to try to field some of those right now. Thanks. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions come through. I just want to point out we do have another training opportunity next month. We do these monthly. We're going to be talking in August about heavy duty engine coolants and cooling system maintenance. So if you are wanting to get schooled up on engine coolant, the various types, why are there so many different colors, how often should I be testing and maintaining my coolant, all of those types of questions, highly encourage you to come back. This is going to be really valuable information, and you can sign up and register for that out on the fleetguard.com website. And we'd love to see you back again next month in August. I do see a couple questions that have come through here. So Sandeep, coolant filters and DEF are different. Yes, these are two different applications altogether, right? So coolant filters or water filters, as they're often called, those are designed for filtering the actual coolant that's flowing through the cooling system. The diesel exhaust fluid is a totally different part of the system, right? So this is all tied in with the exhaust system and after treatment part of the engine application. So yeah, two different types of filters. As far as material compatibility, those DEF filters are designed to filter out diesel exhaust fluid. If you accidentally put diesel fuel into that DEF tank and ran it through the system, that DEF filter is not going to hold up too well to that ultra low sulfur diesel fuel. As that diesel fuel comes through, as best I understand, it's going to really mess that filter up. So it's not necessarily going to plug up. It's going to actually damage the filter. So that's part of the reason, making sure you got the right fluid in the system, super important. Yeah, John, on UF 106, I guess I missed what the spray was used for. So let me just drop back a couple slides. So on that UF 106, that little spray bottle of BioLube, as it's called, this is really for lubricating the threads on that cap housing. So that larger cap that you see here, kind of where he's pulling that filter out of. Let's see. So yeah, the photo here on the right side of the screen, let me highlight it for us. Yeah, so this kind of hard external cap, there are threads, obviously, where it threads onto that dosing, that on that pump unit. That spray bottle is actually designed for lubricating those particular threads. And, it's not recommended. I know we've had questions from customers over the years about, why do we have to buy the whole kit again? Why do we have to, buy all that stuff? We just really want the filter. Well, really as part of that system, that external cap housing, because of the tightness at which it needs to be actually tightened down, with your tools and stuff, they don't want it, there's a potential for that to damage and the threads to, kind of, degrade over time, right? So because of the heat and everything that's, it's kind of exposed to the elements being up under the vehicle, they much prefer, the manufacturer much prefers you just replace that whole system every time you go and do that every 300,000 miles. So hopefully that answers that question, John. That this is kind of technology. We make the filter, sell the filter, but this is really kind of a Cummins emission solutions part of the whole equation. So, we kind of partner with them to make all this work. But that's the recommendation from the manufacturer. Hopefully that answers your question, John. We still got time. Any other questions you guys may have? Okay, well, I don't see anything else coming through. Hey, really appreciate your time. As always, we will see you guys back in August for our coolant discussion. I expect there'll be a lot of questions for that one next time. So please come back. And if you have questions between now and then, certainly reach out. Would be glad to be a resource for you. So thank you guys. Hope you have a great Wednesday, great rest of your week.